Hello everyone, I'm Daz, and this week's discussion is going to be over unsafe drinking water in the United States. Most of us are aware of the Flint, Michigan crisis and how much of an outrage that was. Unfortunately, there are many cities throughout this country that have water that is unsafe to drink. And I'm actually taking this article and I'll share it with you and then share my thoughts on it. Millions of people are exposed to unsafe drinking water every year in the US. Industrial towns like Pittsburgh and Detroit have discovered unsafe levels of lead in their water, which can lead to permanent brain damage in children. Other cities are reeling from the aftermath of chemical spills, which have released toxic substances into their main water supplies. Imagine turning on the tap in the morning to find an unpleasant brown sludge that tastes like metal. Then imagine that state officials told you that water was safe to drink. That was the reality for residents of Flint, Michigan in 2014 when lead from aging pipes seeped into their water system, effectively poisoning an entire community. The scandal was one of the most egregious instances of water contamination in the U.S., but it wasn't an isolated occurrence. Every year from 1982 to 2015, between 9 million and 45 million Americans got their drinking water from a source that violated the standards of the Environmental Protection Agency. While rural areas are the most contaminated, a few major cities have struggled to renovate their aging pipes and enforce safe standards among local jurisdictions. Here are some of the cities with the worst tap water in the U.S. Pittsburgh. Officials have been accused of downplaying the threat of lead-contaminated drinking water. In 2017, the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority issued a warning to residents to boil their tap water after drinking it. Even basic activities like brushing teeth or washing dishes should be done with boiled water, they said. This alert went out after Pennsylvania's environmental regulators discovered low levels of chlorine in the water system, which could potentially expose residents to a parasite called Giardia that causes diarrhea, cramps, and nausea. The city has also struggled to combat high levels of lead in drinking water, with the EPA reporting that there are not enough state officials to perform mandatory inspections. A 2017 audit revealed that health officials in Pittsburgh may have misled residents into thinking their drinking water was safe. Another city is Milwaukee. Milwaukee health officials may have failed to warn families whose children tested positive for lead. Milwaukee has also been mired in scandal when it came to safe drinking water. In 2018, the city's health commissioner, Bevan Baker, resigned amid news that the public health officials failed to warn families whose children tested positive for elevated lead levels from 2015 to 2017. Residents were previously told to install water filters if they lived in a home built prior to 1951, due to concerns about lead contamination. In 2018, environmental activists called upon Milwaukee's mayor, Tom Barrett, to resign over the crisis. Flint, Michigan. Flint residents may no longer be encountering the same odorous brown sludge they discovered in 2014, but local politicians are still worried about whether the tap water is contaminated. In 2017, after 3 years of distributing bottled water to local residents, Flint officials declared the water safe to consume. But Michigan's Congressman Kildee has said the city can't trust its water supply until all the lead service pipes have been replaced. Flint is currently working to replace its old pipes by 2020. The Flint crisis has been spilling over into the Detroit public schools. Michigan's aging infrastructure has posed a similar problem in Detroit, which began testing water supplies in schools in the wake of the Flint crisis. In September of 2018, at least 57 out of 86 Detroit public schools tested positive for elevated levels of copper or lead. Children exposed to lead can suffer from permanent brain damage, which often results in learning disabilities and increased violent behavior. The results prompted Detroit's school district to shut off water fountains in public schools across the city and replace them with temporary water coolers. The city is now working to install filtration systems in every public school. Newark's lead contamination is at an all-time high. Newark's contaminated drinking water has reached crisis levels. In January, New Jersey state monitors revealed that lead contamination in the city was at an all-time high over the last 17 years. From July of 2018 to December of 2018, around 100 out of 240 samples from Newark's water system showed lead levels above the EPA's safety threshold. Officials have also discovered high levels of haloacetic acid, which can form during the water disinfecting process, which causes skin irritation and potentially increases cancer risk. 9 of the city's dozen testing sites have shown high levels of haloacetic acids. The city is now distributing tens of thousands of water filters to local residents. It's also working to replace its lead service lines, a process that could take 8 years. Washington, D.C. has been lead contaminated since the early 2000s. D.C.'s legacy of contamination dates back to the early 2000s when Mark Edwards, the same man who sounded the alarm on the Flint water crisis, warned residents of elevated levels of lead in their drinking water. By 2016, around 12,000 D.C. buildings were still getting their water from lead pipes. Many of the homes at risk of contamination are located in older, less affluent neighborhoods. On average, homeowners will pay around $2,500 to have their lead pipes removed. Brady, Texas. Texas has the most widespread water violations in the U.S., due in large part to the presence of radium, a radioactive substance that has been linked to bone cancer in its water supply. The small city of Brady, Texas has encountered radium levels that are 9 times higher than the EPA limit. Local residents report that the tap water can be orange, brown, or even green in color, and many have resorted to drinking bottled water instead. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore's water samples don't contain nearly as much lead as samples in New York or Detroit, but at least 24 schools have been found to have elevated levels of lead in their drinking water. The city's Druid Lake Reservoir is also clouded with particles that can carry viruses, bacteria, or parasites. Officials are now embarking on a $140 million project to bring the reservoir up to safety standards. Dos Palos, California. Like Texas, California has a statewide water sanitation problem. At least one water supplier in 38 of California's 58 counties violates state water standards. Many Central Valley cities have been hit hard by the California drought, which dried up wells and prompted excessive groundwater pumping that leached toxic levels of arsenic into the water supply. In the city of Dos Palos, residents have switched over to bottled water after it was discovered that their water supply contained trihalomethanes, a group of chemicals that's been linked to kidney problems and increased cancer risk from 2013 to 2018. The city's well failed at least 22 safety tests. Charleston, West Virginia. In 2014, residents of Charleston, West Virginia noticed the smell of licorice wafting through their city. As it turns out, the odor hailed from a massive spill of MCHM, a chemical foam that's used to wash coal. If the chemical is inhaled or comes in contact with skin, it could cause vomiting or irritation, such as itching or burning. As late as 2017, officials continued to express concern about the safety of the city's drinking water. The same year, the nonprofit Environmental Working Group found multiple contaminants in the city's water supply. New Borough in upstate New York declared a state of emergency over contaminated water. In 2016, a 1.3 million gallon reservoir in New Borough, New York tested positive for a dangerous pollutant called perfluorooctane sulfonate, also known as PFOs, which has been linked to cancer and chronic kidney disease. Back in the 1990s, the New York Air National Guard spilled firefighting foam, which contained PFOs, into a stream that connected to the reservoir. The discovery of PFOs prompted New Borough to declare a state of emergency. In 2016, the city has since installed a new filtration system, but residents are concerned that the only way to obtain safe drinking water is to have a reservoir cleanup. So that's the end of that article, and I'll have a link to it in the description box, but those are a lot of cities to have water contamination problems. I'm sure it's even worse. There's conspiracy theories about fluoride being put in the water as well, and I don't doubt that either. Personally, I don't drink tap water. I try to avoid it at all costs. I found that whenever I would drink it, I would end up sick, or I would feel like my skin got irritated. I would say if you can filter your water, it's probably better, or if you can drink non-tap water, even though I do hear some bottled water is just tap water in a bottle. But this is why, if you have faith and believe in God, I would say pray over your drinks as well. But I like to know what you guys' thoughts are on this water crisis. I think it's horrible that here in the United States, a first world nation, there is still issues such as this, and a lot of this can be explained through old pipes that haven't been replaced. I do think that it's no mistake that this happens in impoverished areas, and I'm sure there's a lot of other horrible stuff happening that we're not even going to hear about. But I hope that you guys found this video insightful and that you have a wonderful rest of your week. I'll talk to you in next Monday's live chat. Thank you and have a good rest of your week.